Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're discussing the WHO's so-called pandemic treaty. I've done a number of videos on this topic, and I like to think I've made my views pretty clear that I'm pretty against the notion of Thailand getting on board with this whole thing. My personal opinion is a lot of the problems that Thailand has gone through in the last 3 years, especially economically, can be laid directly at the WHO's doorstep insofar as they, in my opinion, when you look back at the history, may have hesitate to use the word exaggerated, but the criteria for even determining that this thing was a pandemic when it was, quote unquote, determined to be a pandemic was much more fluid than I understood those criteria to be. And then in the aftermath of that, Tedros, the person that heads up the WHO, then tried to make monkeypox into a thing and basically overrode his entire board who had voted against him, or at least a majority of it had, and said, no, this doesn't reach the level of pandemic. He said, I don't care what you say, I'm just gonna call it that. So all of this has made me very uneasy. The whole WHO approach, in my mind, looks very arbitrary and capricious. And the problem is this supranational guidance was then implemented as practical enforcement of mandates and things, again, whatever that means, here in Thailand, the upshot of which was effectively the economy was totally shut down for 2.5 years. Thailand's economy and society in many ways were put in a very moribund state, and it just generally wasn't good. I'm gonna go ahead and try something new with this video. We're gonna go ahead and play a video I found on Twitter. This is from a gal testifying at the EU regarding what the provisions of this treaty would actually entail. So we'll go ahead and play that clip, and I'll come back to you after we're done playing it.
We're undergoing a soft coup, and the idea is to create a whole new set of laws and ignore the existing human rights laws and other laws under the pretext of pandemic preparedness and the biosecurity agenda. The WHO is developing through all its nations, but with the WHO Directorate in the United States in charge, a pandemic treaty and amendments to the existing international health regulations that will remove the human rights protections currently embedded in the IHRs, will enforce surveillance, censorship, get rid of freedom of speech, require governments to censor and only push a single narrative. Also, we will be subject, if they can make this work, to vaccines developed in 100 days, which the organization CEPI is planning to do. And one of the people who founded CEPI was Jeremy Farrar, who is now the chief scientist at the WHO to bring this forward. Other things that the amendments do is to bind the states so they're no longer recommendations, but enforceable edicts. Provide a liability shield, get rid of intellectual property rights, move supplies from one country to another, enforce digital passports, and the Director General of WHO can demand that a pandemic or a potential pandemic exists. He can just declare it with no standards, and then countries around the world will have to obey. Also, the WHO will tell you what drugs you can and can't use in your nation once a pandemic is declared. Obviously, the budget will increase. One Health is another part of this. One Health is a concept that was created to enable the WHO, with these documents, to take over jurisdiction of everything in the world by saying that climate change, animals, plants, water systems, ecosystems are all central to health. Also embedded in this concept is a peculiar notion that humans are no longer of greater value than animals.
Yeah, as you can see, the implications of this, if nothing else, it looks to me like the whole thing, let's presume everybody acts in good faith. Let's make that presumption. If implemented, these provisions would effectively supersede all the basic notions of human rights and due process, just entire notions that we've had in the civilized world since the Enlightenment, basically, about notions of just basic freedoms and basic human rights, natural law. Again, this thing, I don't quite have the words to articulate how concerned I am about this, because having seen what we went through from 2020 to up to now, when all of this was guidance, to having it turned into some kind of decree which is instantaneously implementable on an international level, makes me very, very concerned. And I think Thailand must look at this and say to itself, is this worth it for this country? Because at the end of the day, sovereignty issues arise, all kinds of issues associated with just basic notions of the nation state come into play. And I think it would behoove everyone to take a big, deep breath, look at this calmly and rationally, and in my opinion, not just adopt it as it is at this time.